Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my series, You Are the Planets. My name is Tara All, and you can find me or contact me through my website, which is taraall.com. There's lots of A's in there, so it's TARAAAL.com. But I am excited to be continuing this series. For those of you who are not familiar with my Planets on the First adventure, let's see, almost 5 years ago, 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I started working with Planets on the First, which is a technique where, well, from the technical aspect, you choose a planet that you want to live through, like as a filter, to experience first in your life. In other words, that planet, the part of you that it represents, the part of you that is in you, is kind of like the filter or the lens through which you experience life. So if there's a particular part of yourself that you want to develop, that you are interested in exploring more, or even maybe that you're having a struggle with, choosing a planet first is an awesome way to really get intimate with that part of you. And this whole thing started for me. I was working with astrology, but also with Open Human Heart work with Adam Gainsbourg, and I was having this frustration around how was I going to keep doing astrology, being so stuck up in my head, at the same time as I was trying to be so present in my heart and more so in my body. And so his suggestion was try Planets on the First, and it has been amazing for me, not just with my astrology, although it has really enriched my experience of the archetypes, but just as a human being and awareness of myself and life. Planets on the First just really rocks it out of the park for me. So in 2015, on my birthday, which is July 20th, I chose Venus for my very first round. And then subsequently I went to Mercury the next year, Mars the next year, and I'm just wrapping up a year where I've chosen Moon and Saturn together, which I'll talk about in a different space. But so after doing this and sharing this and working with clients and just sharing through different presentations and different conferences and online events, I keep getting excited about Planets First, and I haven't stopped wanting to do it with myself or share it. So the birth of these meetings started through EA Zoom meetings, which I am so thankful to be a part of. It's just an amazing community. I realized that I wanted to have a video for each planet, and not one that has a PowerPoint with a bunch of technical things. I love doing that, but I love it less, as time goes on. This is more about sharing a little bit of my experience with the planets and some ideas for how you can work with them as a living meditation. So anyhow, I wanted to have a video of each planet, and so this is a bit of a slow moving progress, but I'm getting there one by one. So I already have a You Are the Moon, I have You Are Mercury, and then today we are right here together, whether you're here today or years in the future, we're doing You Are Venus, which truly is timeless. And it's special for me because my whole beginning journey with Planets on the First began with Venus. So in some respects, I'm back to the beginning, and I'm really feeling that at my birthday next month, I may go back and do another Venus round, just because it's been, so, and I'll share a little bit about my first experience with Venus. But for me, as someone who is pretty intellectual, pretty up in my head a lot of the time, Venus, for me, when I choose it, causes some amazing shifts within me. And I'm enjoying that space more and more. So this idea of Planets on the First, you can get into it technically, and if you use, I'm not sure about all of the different software programs, but in SolarFire, under house systems, you can just choose Venus first, Mercury first, and it will shift the chart for you so that you can see what it looks like when it rotates. The planets in the signs don't change. The relationships between planets don't change. It just rotates. So the houses change, right? So for me, if Venus goes on the first house, then everything just shifts that direction. But the aspects and the signs don't change. But the houses, because of that shift, and because when you choose a planet first, everything, at least in theory, is being experienced through that energy, that then makes everything a little bit different, right? Because if I'm a pretty Mercury-Saturn person in general, and that's my go-to in life, if all of a sudden I switch to Venus first, for example, my Venus-Pluto square is going to feel a lot different from the Venus perspective than the Saturn-Mercury perspective. And this is where it gets interesting, because everything's already happening, but we just aren't tuned into it all the time. So one of the gifts of working with a planet first is that it's, I like to call it astrology as a living meditation. You know, it's like I was saying, you don't have to even technically use the chart. If you enjoy that, it's a great piece to add, and I do. But more than anything, I just really get into the archetype. You know, from the intellectual side, I might, you know, find some good books, some good information. I look into like the planetary walks, the different meditations, things you can do associated with whatever planet I choose. But also, I just really tune into what I think that planet means, and then I start to tune into those spaces in myself. And with Venus represents lots of things, so I don't intend to touch on all of them. And there are different views, of course, from the traditional to modern, and then my foundation is evolutionary astrology. But for me, when I chose Venus the first time, it's interesting because I wasn't looking for a primary partner at the time. In fact, I was really excited just to explore and meet different people and to just really do more of what I loved in life. It was right at that time that I quit my 22-year career in healthcare as a compliance director, and I pulled out half my retirement, and I decided that I was going to really pursue astrology, the tarot, and metaphysics, and kind of, I guess, for lack of a better word, you know, the drive for me to have a more spiritually involved career. And so I was doing that, which is certainly, you know, part of Venus first, right? Because Venus is about what you love and what you like and what feels good. You know, Venus isn't so concerned with, you know, reasoning out the process of, you know, doesn't make sense, and you know, even maybe am I best suited to it? Like Venus comes from a drive of just feels good to me. You know, it feels comfortable to me. Venus doesn't want to spend, the Venus in us doesn't want to spend our days doing things that are not pleasurable, right? Venus is the pleasure principle. Venus is the part in us that enjoys enjoying things. You know, it's not a dry existence with Venus. You know, it's things are juicy. So anyhow, I wasn't looking for a primary partner, but I choose Venus first, and I meet the love of my life. It's been almost 4 years later, and we're super happy together. But it's not just the happy, right? I mean, he's amazing, and we have this amazing thing together. But it is the first relationship for me in a primary partnership with the level of intimacy and vulnerability that comes from really being able to be open and being able to be an equal with someone, you know? And so that was a huge gift, but it was with Venus first. And with Venus first too, like I had been on some really restricted diets prior to that due to some digestive issues and some different things with my body. And I really kind of opened that up, right? I started eating, I had ice cream for the first time in years again, and I started eating a bunch of yummy things. I put on, I don't know, close to 20 pounds probably. So it definitely was a little curvier. And so like the Venus just came out, and I didn't set into it to say, oh, I want to gain 20 pounds and have a partner. And, I didn't go into it that way. It just happened because for me, when I chose that Venus part, it just came alive. And clearly that part in me wanted to be alive. So when you're thinking about, if you think about doing a planet first, kind of feel into who wants to play, who really wants a voice, what part of you would like to take the lead for a while, maybe for the rest of your life, who knows. But so Venus being the pleasure principle, that's just one aspect of Venus, but Venus wants things to be comfortable. And so even fabric or material that doesn't feel particularly nice or high quality, words that come out kind of clunky, shapes that are out of proportion, sounds that are dissonant. These are all things that sort of can scratch at that Venusian desire to have harmony and balance and beauty. Venus wants the environment, including the people and the things in it, and including himself or herself, to be beautiful. There's many different ways to define beauty, so it doesn't look one way. But when you are working with your Venus, or when you are in your Venus, you are absolutely judging what you like, what you love, what's attractive, what's ugly, what's disgusting, right? Like Venus as an archetype wants to choose. Now, we all know that Libra, ruled by Venus, has a hard time choosing sometimes, but that's not because Libra doesn't want to choose. That's just because it gets hooked up on worrying about the other person and compromise and harmony in relationship, which is a big part of Venus. And we'll talk about that. But the part I want to emphasize more here is that Venus wants to choose. It's different than being in Neptune land, right? And we can think of Neptune as the higher octave of Venus, right? Venus being personal love, Neptune being transcendent, universal love, or love for everything, all things, versus love for a individual person. But like with Neptune, choosing isn't really part of the equation, right? Neptune is really accepting. So there's this element of when you're in Neptune space of just accepting what is, allowance. But that's not Venus. Venus wants to choose, right? Venus absolutely wants to choose. And Venus will choose. So, the Venus in you is looking to choose what it desires. It's not aggressive or assertive like Mars. And it's interesting because when we look at Venus and Mars as a team, oftentimes we talk about Venus being our feminine energy and Mars being our masculine energy, which has nothing to do with male and female, but those words always get, snarled up. So if you like yin and yang, you can use that. If you like day and night, which, Jason Hawley rocks that out all the time, day and night, which I like as well. But whatever fits for you, the idea really here with my point of bringing them up here is that they both have to do with desire. They both have to do, in some respects, what we want, what we love, what we desire. But Mars is the energy that asserts ourselves to go and get that thing that we want, right? Venus, at a deep level, cultivates the environment to receive what we want. Sometimes we think about Mars going and getting the thing that our Venus wants. I leave a lot of room for space to play around these things, but this is just giving an idea of how these two energies are. And my point really being is that Venus is the more receptive energy. Venus doesn't work hard for things, right? It's like, In mythology, Venus like reclines back on her chaise lounge, right, and her lovers just line up for her to receive them. She doesn't do anything to earn love. She is inherently lovable. She's inherently valuable. Just who she is such a draw that everybody wants to be with her. You know, we know the stories that, you know, there's the story of, well, her husband really wasn't too pleased with her amorous affairs, but the other gods were pretty excited about it. And there was one point in time where Venus and Mars were caught up in a net by some sort of trick that Venus's husband had set up. And at the time, Mercury, who was actually the least inclined to have affairs with immortals, Mercury even expresses his desire, you know, to be with Venus. So we can see that the attraction, her attraction power is great, even for those who wouldn't be particularly inclined for like that direction. Like her power is that magnetizing to draw to her. So when we work with the Venus archetype, in part, when we're in touch with what we love, with our own beauty, and with the beauty outside of us, when we're feeling, you know, really in touch with our feeling body, when we are embodied in our flesh, Venus also absolutely is linked with embodiment. When we're in that space, like, we attract life to us. It really is like a magnet. And so what you've got going on the inside really pulls from the outside. And for me, you know, that's what happened with my Darren. It's interesting, for those of you who like to geek out a little bit on astrology, Darren in his birth chart has Venus in the 7th house. And so I think to myself, wow, if I hadn't, and we know how often that planets in the 7th house get projected, right? Or people look for them in a partner or in something outside of themselves. And I wonder if I hadn't chosen Venus first, and I hadn't been really into that energy, I wonder if I would have been that appealing initially to him. Like, I feel like that was part of what opened the door. You know, he needed to see that part of me. And I don't always lead with that part of me. So this is the thing, like, when you lead with something different, no matter what planet you pick first, you put something else out there. Think about a natal planet on the ascendant. You know, that's how you step into life. It's like, it's instinctual. So a planet first is very much an instinctual experience. You know, once you set the intention, and I'm a firm believer that so many things, you know, it's about intention. If your intention is to embody Venus, and you put your attention into that, you know, maybe you dress a little more Venusian, maybe you experiment with new music or new dance, or maybe you start crafting a new art, maybe you even enter into different kinds of conversations where you really listen more and you really want to have a conversation of an exchange that is more than just like always thinking what you're going to say next. When you do that, you shift your entire experience. Just by attention on that, the things start to happen. You know, I am also a big believer that, you know, what your thoughts are on is what happens for you in life. What we think becomes what we see, right? So if I'm thinking about all of the delicious things I can eat and I go to the grocery store, I'm going to see yummy stuff. But if I'm thinking about everything I shouldn't be eating, or, I don't know, overanalyzing the ingredients, maybe I'm worried about, you know, my budget, so I can only spend $2, right? Then I'm going to see things differently. It's about choosing how you want to see. And Venus, of course, is the goddess of love. And so, which gets tricky. right? Because we're so pre-programmed about love, you know, what it means, how it's supposed to look, how it feels, what it means to love, what it takes to love, what you have to give up to love. And my suggestion with Venus to myself and to all of you is to let that reveal itself to you. You know, like, give yourself some time just to see what love looks like, feels like, behaves like, and what it really requires, if it requires anything for you. You know, it's like a self-discovery of something new. If you pretend that you really don't know what something means, show up and find out. It's going to give you more truth, at least more of what's true to you, which is enlivening. You know, like, that's not living out a story anymore. That's living out your own experience. And when you shift your awareness to that, it's a little scary because you have less, you have less history to depend on. Which, what I mean by that is, you can't just necessarily say, oh, I know how it went in the last 3 relationships, which means now it's going to go this way in this one, right? That there's a certain level of safety in that, because we can say, well, I've done it. I know how to do it. I know how this works for me. But at the same time, anytime we draw from the past as a way to actualize the present, we don't leave room for what really might be available. In other words, we've already shoved contents in a container before we even knew what was there. So one of my old narratives was that love always requires some kind of sacrifice. I mean, like, at a deep level, you got to give up almost a part of your essential self for love. And when you commit to love, you've committed. You need to stay. So the way that translated in my life was, initially, evidence proves that I thought that when you formed an intimate relationship with someone, that then you needed to marry them. So I proceeded to do that a number of times, and in many cases stayed too long. Like worrying more about keeping the commitment even when it wasn't pleasurable. And I don't mean just simple things, right? I'm all about compromise, working things out. I just mean there's a certain level of, it's like my teacher Laura Nalbandian used to say, compromise takes 2 people. If 2 people aren't in it, it's sacrifice. And that really kind of sums up how I did relationships for, the first big chunk of my life. So, welcome to a new day for me. And I'm not saying that, every relationship, every part of it wasn't like that, but that was an overarching theme, and this idea that there was, that maybe enjoying it or being pleasurable or even getting, sexual satisfaction out of something, that those really weren't the most important things. In fact, you might need to learn to do without those things once you've made a commitment, because love looks a certain way. Mm-hmm. So I kind of had this programming, and some of us do too, that, love takes hard work. Mm-hmm. It's one way to look at it. But it's just one way to look at it. Hard work is just one perspective on something. With Darren and I, we have our moments. We had to work through our stuff like everybody else, but I would never categorize our relationship as hard work. In fact, I've come to a place in life where I feel like that was an old choice of mine. And it wasn't just relationships. Like, I love to make everything hard. So guess what? If you choose Venus, it's time for things to be easy. Huh? Sometimes it's fine to just lay back and enjoy the moment. Venus loves to do that. everything doesn't need to be a fight. Venus is the lover, not the fighter. So, you know, Venus for me is almost like this huge exhale of life doesn't have to be that hard. I don't have to be that hard on myself, you know, and it's okay to want things to be easy. It's okay to want to feel good. It's okay to want things to look good. You know, like, it's wonderful to be in an environment where you're surrounded by beauty. And with Venus, you know, that's important. It's very important. So one of the book that I've been reading and getting ready for this particular Zoom meeting, I'll hold the book up, but for those of you who are just listening, which is how I tend to do it when I tune into videos and meetings, is the book is In Love with Venus by Angela Moore. And one of the quotes from the book that I will read for you now, she says, "Tuning into the beauty that is going on all around you can awaken you to a higher order, give you an anchor to a certainty of amazing wonder, and affect subtle alignments in your psyche which can literally change your life." And I love that. You know, in the solar system, Venus has the most perfectly circular orbit of all the bodies. So she literally, this idea of symmetry, proportion, harmony, we can see it. You can see it in the pattern that she makes in the sky, which is amazing, right? And the only other planet that is comparable to her circularity is Neptune, which I found very interesting because, of course, Neptune being the higher octave of Venus. So, and these are also the planets that we associate with artistic expression, right? With music, with creativity, with all the things in life that are beautiful. So there's something about this idea of circularity that is beautiful, you know, and it contains everything. There aren't sharp edges, you know, there aren't rough corners with Venus. It's flowing, it's curvy. You know, the feminine nature, the feminine in nature itself is form. You know, the masculine is consciousness itself, which never changes. But for us to experience it manifested takes the feminine. So the feminine is everything that changes, everything that is changing. You know, it's creativity in motion constantly, you know, and we're part of that. So this is the thing, like with Venus, even though there was a very social element when we link in the Libra side, from the Taurus side, this very tangible, physical, grounded, stable, solid, having an experience in my body is so much Venus. Okay, what we haven't talked about is Venus in relationships. At least, I guess I talked about my relationship, but just in general, Venus with relationships. So in choosing Venus first, the one thing about that lens, the lens through which you view life, or the way that you are responding to every moment in your life, when Venus is first, Venus is always looking at the we. So for some of us, people like me that have Aries rising, that's a big difference, huh? Because Venus is always concerned with the relationship. And if the relationship is working, not working, comfortable, if everybody's engaged, if everybody's being heard, and like in a primary partnership, the default would be the we with Venus. And so that can be an exciting thing to play around with. What in your moment when something's happening, if you approach it from the we, how is that different from maybe your usual approach to life? You know, I would use myself as an example because I'm the best example that I have, because I live with me. And when something happens in my life, my default generally is to personalize it. You know, it's not that I don't care about other people. I'm a very caring person, but I tend to take it personally first. You know, example would be, let's just say something unpleasant happens, or something feels off. Maybe a communication feels, I don't know, rough, or maybe a little bit aggressive, or maybe someone seems like they're angry, right? My default is to receive that as, what did I do? What did they not like about me? Whereas the Venus default would be more, one, it might even first look at the other person entirely, right? What might be going on with that person today? Oh my goodness, they seem so upset. I wonder if they're okay. Whole different approach, right? Or the we could just simply be, my gosh, you know, are we okay? What's going on with us? You see, so Venus is always about looking across the way. You know, the Libra archetype, one of the signs that Venus rules, rules the opposition. You know, which is always about, you know, me here, you over there. So, and it's an exchange from across the way. So Venus in general is always looking to see what the other person is doing, what other people are doing. There is a big focus on others and how the others come together with me to make a we. That is the emphasis. So, you know, living Venus first, the concern very much is going to be, are we communicating well? Are we understanding each other? You know, are we on the same page? Are we able to do this together? Are we in it together, right? Because Venus likes being together. Venus is all about relationships and also just the art of love, you know, so the different connections that we make, the different relationships that we have, the partnerships, the agreements, the contracts, you know, all what's underneath all this is the idea of relationship. What happens when people come together and collaborate? You know, Venus is a stellar collaborator. So if one thing that you've been, you know, maybe experiencing in your life is maybe it hasn't been so easy for you to work together, you know, maybe you like to just do it your way, or you prefer just to be told how to do it, right? There's two ways to look at this, right? So some people really like to be driving the bus, right? Other people don't want to drive the bus at all. They want to just sit in the back while someone else takes care of it. The thing about Venus energy is it's equals. So in relationships, in the beginning, I spoke about how I had a tendency to not have what I'm calling equal partnerships. And all I mean by that is that initially it was more comfortable or more familiar to me to have relationships where one person clearly was more in charge than the other person. And we can call this hierarchical love, right? Where one person has more of a parent role. Maybe one person has more of a teacher role. But there is not equality on some level, you know, and this can create a certain level of safety because, one, if you're not comfortable being an equal and you're not comfortable standing up and holding your own, you know, really holding your own space, right? That's another Venus thing. I can embody myself and hold my space while you hold your space. And then together we can do something fantastic together. But if you're not comfortable with that, one way to escape it is to choose people who will just step in and do it for you, you know, who kind of just take over. And the other way to avoid it is to be the person on top, you know. If you choose partners who can't meet you equally, you can have a certain level of superiority. And you probably don't think about it as superiority, but it's what it is, because the safety is that I don't have to really relate to this person. And I can feel good about myself because oh, either I take care of them or I help them, whatever the stories are, right? Venus isn't about all of that. Venus is about equality, egalitarian relationships, equal meeting of the minds. So I'm going to throw this out there. I don't have anything fact really to base it on, but I would say that most of us tend to not really choose Venus as the underarching energy in our relationships. A lot of us go with the moon, which is trying to play out old family dynamics and resolve them through a new partnership. The moon also, in particular, when it comes to love, there's a neediness to the moon. So it's like trying to use relationships to get unfulfilled child needs met, which is normal and natural, and we all are going to do this. But what I mean is, with a certain level of awareness, we can come to recognize that what we sometimes call partnerships, what we sometimes call love, is really more of a meeting needs, playing out old stories together, trying to resolve old karma, dealing with mommy and daddy dynamics that we never did, and now we attract this person, and oh my God, they play the role so perfectly, and we can do it, and it's all subconscious most of the time. But my point here is that that's not Venus. And Neptune love is another beautiful thing, right? With Neptune, oh my goodness, right? It's a fairy tale, and we want the fairy tale. It's a dream, it's surreal, it's so romantic that we literally feel like we're not on the planet anymore. And one example that I made a note to remind myself here is that when it comes to sex, for example, Neptune, we desire to leave the physical body. I mean, the body is the vehicle to transcend our separateness, right? So sex can be a vehicle to experience the divine, to experience a greater energy. But that's so different than Venus, right? Because Venus wants to be in the body. Venus isn't trying to transcend anything. Venus really, maybe more than any of the other archetypes, is about showing up and staying in the body, in the flesh, mind to mind. Here I am. But equality is kind of a scary thing because, it's like, think about at work, right? Think about, especially for those of us who are comfortable with a chain of command. It's nice to know that, oh, Janice is the one who is responsible for that. So I don't have to worry about that. Janice does it. Or clearly knowing that I am responsible for these things. I handle them myself. I don't have to worry about someone else getting in my way. There is this certain safety, again, in knowing who's in charge, or knowing the order of who's in charge, or knowing who owns what, right? With Venus, kind of those things go out the window, and then it's like you sit across from someone and you say, oh my gosh, okay, if no one's in charge, meaning if it's a group of people or even two people, there's not one person in charge. Everybody's got to find a way to work together equally. Someone doesn't get elevated. Someone doesn't fall below someone else. All ideas are equal. Everyone's feelings are equal. So this is a space, I'm just saying, that we're less comfortable in. Because there's less hiding that can be done. And then you have to really learn what it means to work things out with someone else. So yes. So also with Venus, in addition to these pieces, one thing in evolutionary astrology that we look at Venus a lot is for essential needs and values, which is very important because So there can be a lot of things that we want, things that we desire, things that we love, that we might be willing to live without. Essential needs are the things that we won't live without, which means that on some level we're going to get them met, and whether we do that constructively, destructively, healthily, unhealthily, is up to us, but we are going to get them met. And so it can be really useful to tune into your Venus and your particular needs and values, so that you can really make sure that you can give them to yourself, in the best way, and that you can share with your partner, with the people that are important to you in your life, so that they also recognize what those things are. Some examples of this are, if you have a Venus in Aries, you're going to have an essential need for freedom. There, you need to be able to do your own thing. You need space to take charge of yourself and do what you want, when you want. I don't mean all the time, but this is important. So let's just say that a Venus and Aries person gets themselves stuck in a relationship where the other person really wants to keep things locked down, and also wants to do everything as a team, all the time. Well, eventually something is going to happen to give that Venus and Aries person some space and some autonomy, because they essentially need it. It's going to happen. So, if you want to keep that relationship, it's good to have a conversation and come up with a plan for how you can give yourself that space. There's happy ways to do it. And it doesn't have to mean, let's say that the other person is very worried that means that you're leaving me or you're not including me. You can really share, hey, I'm a better we when I can do me. That's a powerful thing. And when the other person can feel that that's a shared discussion and they can actually support you doing you, then you've shifted into the healthy Venus dynamic in the sign of Aries. It's not leaving the relationship behind. It's including the partner in supporting you doing your own thing, which is a different flavor, right? Okay, so let's run through the signs just briefly. We'll only scratch the surface, but it might get you thinking. So Venus in Taurus is going to need stability, going to need security, going to need comfort. If things get too wonky, things get too emotionally dramatic, if there's not enough money, it's going to be an issue for Venus and Taurus. Venus and Taurus also is like a double down, right? So Venus is already an archetype of self-love. So anytime, and this is worth mentioning, anytime that you choose Venus, whether you choose to live Venus first, or just Venus comes to your mind, or Venus is big in your chart, or you just like the idea of the goddess Venus, you're working with self-love, and to the extent that you can really love yourself as you are, will really change your experience of how others love you, how the world receives you, and how you love in general, right? So when Venus is in her own sign, Taurus, which also is intimately connected with self-love and self-worth and self-value, one of the essential needs for that placement is self-sufficiency, and really the deepest self-appreciation and love that you could imagine. This deep rootedness in knowing that I'm beautiful, valuable just as I am, and that in itself is worth spending time with and appreciating the beauty of that, the beauty inside of yourself, which then, by the way, translates outside, as within, as without, as above, so below. You all know this, but this is a place where we can see that especially. So when it comes to Venus and Gemini, it needs to communicate, right? Can you imagine Gemini without talking, or some level of communication, right? That's important. You need to be able to share what's on your mind. You need to be able to have a conversation. You need to hear what someone else is thinking. That's important. You know? And you're going to get it. So, for example, let's say if you choose a partner that's not very communicative, you're going to go somewhere else to get it. You know, curiosity and variety live with Gemini as well. So it can be an essential need just for things, you know, to shake it up a little bit. Things get too boring, and if you're not, you know, especially mentally stimulated, you know, that Venus and Gemini is going to be naturally seeking something that is, because that's an essential need. You need to be curious. You need to learn, right? If the learning is gone and there's nothing interesting left, yeah, not such a turn on anymore. So Venus in Cancer needs emotional connection, needs emotional intimacy, needs to feel emotionally safe, but the emotional intimacy is big. So if you get yourself in a relationship, even and especially one that you choose to be with someone who's not emotionally available, you're going to find someone else for the emotional intimacy, guaranteed. Now, so think about what you're choosing, you know, and think about what you really need, especially when it comes to relationships. Venus in Cancer needs, you know, a level of sensitivity, someone who cares how you feel. Venus in Leo, well, there's a need to express oneself. And there's a need for passion. Venus in Leo needs love, needs to be loved, and needs to feel comfortable to be their full self and to be received as their full self. So you need room to shine when you have a Venus in Leo. And play can be part of it as well. But there's so much passion in a Venus in Leo, you know. Life should be passionate. And there should be a place somewhere for you to express how much passion you have in a way that people can see that light. And in a way that light, you know, then magnifies. So Venus and Virgo. You know, Virgo always gets such a bad rap sometimes for, you know, all the details and perfection and analysis and critical nature, but Venus ultimately, Venus in Virgo ultimately needs on some level, you know, to make things better. And, you know, we see oftentimes the Virgo energy come through healing, which is being able to find, you know, the pieces that are off or out of balance and bring them back into equilibrium. Mm-hmm. But Venus in Virgo also can just be making things better on a daily basis, finding ways, you know, to be useful, finding ways to use the craftsmanship that Virgo is so good at. You know, Venus and Virgo wants to make beautiful things, wants to make the details just right, you know, cares about the technique. Venus in Libra, again, here we put Venus back in her other sign. Venus in Libra needs relationships, needs social connection, needs cooperation, needs harmony, needs balance. Venus in Libra, in most cases, is really relationship driven. They need to be with people, want to be with people. You know, like sharing life with other people is the ultimate essential need. I mean, we all as humans want that, but we have different levels of it. And Venus in Libra, it's important. And then not just having the relationship, but having the balance in the relationship, you know, having it feel good, knowing that it is, you know, everyone's okay and everyone feels good about it and everyone's enjoying it, you know. Venus in Libra, you know, Libra is, you know, Leo's about love as well, but Libra really is about that love shared with someone else. So the essential need to constantly be having a love affair with something, is a big part of Venus in Libra. Venus in Scorpio needs to get beneath the surface. Scorpio is not a sign that messes around with superficiality. There's a need to dig in, get deep, to penetrate, to get to the motivation, to get into the guts of something. So there can be a need to really psychologically understand oneself and a partner or others. Or, just the need for intensity, right? Scorpio is an intense sign. It's known as, playing the edges of life and death because that's what makes it feel alive, So a certain level of drama with Venus and Scorpio oftentimes is they want a certain level of drama because there's a need to feel on the deepest level, the power that comes from really feeling something. On the another aspect of Venus and Scorpio can also be just the need to be in control. So that can definitely show up in relationships. The need to keep oneself under control, keep things under control, to have control. There's a million ways we can take these things, but that one's worth mentioning because it shows up a lot, especially in relationship dynamics. And then Venus in Sagittarius. Well, Venus in Sagittarius needs to have fun. Life just cannot be a boring, get up in the morning, make my breakfast, go to work, come home, make dinner, watch TV. Like, Venus in Sagittarius needs to experience the unknown, needs to escape into adventures and journeys. And that can be physical travel, or it could be just simply escaping in your own mind, discovering something new, but being in your own space. Because the thing about Sagittarius is it really does need room to roam. The wild natural self needs room to express. So, excitement, fun, adventure are all important. Another piece with Venus in Sagittarius is a need for the truth, which is actually shared a bit by Venus in Scorpio because both those archetypes are stuck with the truth or focused on the truth, but in slightly different ways. With Venus in Scorpio, the truth is really more of kind of a sniffing out the motivation or the truth of a situation or a person, kind of like a detective type of getting to the truth. In Sagittarius, the truth is more discovering of really the truth of what is, the truth of existence, the truth of what life means to you, the truth of who you are, right? The truest way that you can live, in accordance with your own nature is more of the Sagittarius truth. So to discover those truths, we have to get outside of our own backyard and our own comfort zone. There has to be some sort of venturing into unknown territory so the truth can self-arise. So Sagittarius needs that freedom. In some ways, Sagittarius is always on a journey. And it's not really about the destination. That's the point. So you see, when you realize it isn't about the destination, then you realize it can't end. It doesn't want to end. So moving on to Venus in Capricorn, there is certainly a need for respect. Venus in Capricorn people want to be respected. They want to be successful, to be accomplished, to be responsible people. Venus in Capricorn also has an element of control to it. Shares that with the Scorpio archetype, but again in slightly different flavors. But Venus in Capricorn, really, there's a there's an expectation, a need it's almost like for professionalism, you know, it's like people should do what they show up, do what they say, and be accountable. So you can imagine a Venus and Capricorn person, let's say that they really like being the top dog. So they attract people in relationships who play the submissive, but in the long run, there's going to be an issue because the essential need of a Venus and Capricorn is for the other person to really show up and be responsible. You know, they may be initially attracted to someone who is not at that place, but ultimately that's what they want. They want a partner, like a serious partner who can commit and who they can work together with to achieve greater goals, whatever that is for them. So, you know, someone that's just, you know, screwing around with life and can't really count on what they say, that's just not going to work. Or someone with zero ambition, you know, in the long run. So we move then to Venus in Aquarius, which is another archetype of freedom, different from Sagittarius, but definitely needing freedom, maybe more than any sign. You know, Aquarius is needs authenticity. You know, needs to be able to move away from how things should be, expect to be, and move into a space of really authentic expression, you know. So Venus in Aquarius also needs a level of objectivity, needs to be able to step back and see things from the side. You know, there's a Venus in Aquarius is a social intellectual sign, oftentimes very focused on making things better for humanity, you know, so there can be so much altruism in this placement, and also a true love of helping humankind progress, helping the environment, all of these types of forward thinking, but it's not in a personal, emotional, connected way, because Venus in Aquarius is not particularly comfortable overwhelmed with feeling or emotion, or especially being pushed to, you know, to share their feelings or to operate from a feeling standpoint. You know, this is a sign that is much more comfortable with enough breathing room and space to actually see, you know, the whole picture. So in relationships, getting involved with someone who is overly emotional can be really difficult. One, because they will perceive the Venus and Aquarius person oftentimes as being detached or not caring. And it's not an issue of caring, it's just that people have different ways of expressing themselves, and different things open them up to be willing to receive. And I'll throw this thing in here now, that Venus in your chart by sign and house and aspect shows the type of energy that makes you most open to receive. And you can look at this as open to receiving life, open to receiving love, even just being open to being like present in the moment. So if we take a Venus and Aquarius person, they have this essential need for a certain level of detachment, a certain level of objectivity, a certain level of space, you know, to think it through and to come up with new ideas, and to not to be pushed emotionally. So for a Venus and Aquarius to be receptive, for example, receptive to love, receptive to a relationship, even open to like receiving something in the moment, there needs to be a certain level of objectivity. If you come at that Venus and Aquarius person with a super loaded personal, emotional dynamic, it's not going to get them to be open to you, right? So one thing you can pay attention to is if you want people to be open to receiving what you say, or even what you want, or open to doing something with you, open to experiencing something with you, if you know where their Venus is, you have a pretty good idea of what will make them open to wanting to do it. You know, I have a Venus in Cancer, so if I don't feel it, and if I don't feel like someone really cares about my feelings or is kind of personally wanting to be emotionally involved with me, or if I don't feel like I belong, I'm not going to really be open to doing it. But even if it was something I didn't want to do, if someone came to me with a lot of feeling and said, I love being with you so much, I wish you would come do this thing with me, I would probably do it even if I hated it, because the emotional connection would be there. So this is kind of what I'm going for. So you can think about this with all of the sign placements, and see how it's true for you. See how open you are to something when it's right in the zone of your Venus sign versus one that's really maybe at odds with your Venus sign, or maybe one that's in opposition or square or quincunx to yours. Okay, so we didn't finish up with the last one, which is Venus and Pisces. And Venus and Pisces, at some level, Venus and Pisces always needs a level of the magic, what I call it. There needs to be room to dream. There needs to be room to, invite possibility for whatever could be. But on a more practical level, Venus and Pisces needs compassion, needs a sense of unity. And there's a level of acceptance, right? So Venus and Pisces oftentimes is what they're really desiring, especially in a relationship, is someone who fully accepts them, as they are, and can love them to the best extent possible that we can as humans, unconditionally. Pisces is not an archetype of it's not an archetype of trying to break things down and make them better. It's the appreciation, love, and acceptance of exactly what is. So there is that piece with the Venus in Pisces. Venus in Pisces also needs to do things that are inspiring, and this doesn't have to be art. For some people it is, some people it's music, but Venus in Pisces needs to be on some level swept away by spirit. To be, when I think about inspired, like to be in the spirit of something, to be swept away by something. So, okay. I think that wraps that up pretty well. I'm thinking what my last thoughts on Venus are. It's interesting, this time in my life right now, I am going through a big Neptune transit, which is interesting because in ways my organization in my mind, even how I put things together, it's not quite how it used to be, which is super cool because I find a freedom in it, and I find that discovering more of really who I am and even how I naturally do things or how I like to do things. But at the same time, sometimes it's a little bit scary because I don't know where I'm going, and I don't have necessarily, I don't even want to know where I'm going. It's just that in the space of, I don't know, I sometimes surprise myself even what comes out. So like, for example, just for this talk on Venus, I was super excited about this. For weeks I've been excited. I've had my little notebook out, and I was reading that book, and I'm going to immerse myself in Venus. And it's interesting that I think I felt into Venus more than I did any reading or research or even writing on it. And one of the things that came to me was the word sweetness, and the idea of life being sweet with Venus, and tasting the sweetness of life, and hearing the sweet harmony in life, and treasuring the sweet moments in life. And even when you just think about eating things, the difference between, sweet, sour, spicy, whatever they may be, And you don't have to have a sweet tooth, to appreciate sweetness. But with Venus, I recognized there was a level of sweet, and in particular, not bitter. So in my moment, I recognize that there are so many times that I don't look for the sweetness first, And so what I really like about Venus for me is that when I'm thinking about the sweetness, even enjoying tasting something sweet, right? Or smelling something sweet. Smelling flowers, for example, is a beautiful thing to do with Venus. Working with aromatherapy is a beautiful thing to do in working with Venus. But how can you bring sweetness to your life? And if you don't like the word sweetness, come up with a different word. But it's a simple thing. And even think about kids, right? Most kids love sweets. But think beyond just the taste of sweet. Like, what is it like to have a life full of sweetness? And what if you were able to kind of find a way to top everything with your own form of sugar? It's a very different way of looking at life. Maybe some of you, I'm sure, are very Venusian driven, and maybe the way you've always done it. But for some of us, it's not. And just to slowing down to say, can I find the sweetness here? Or where is the sweetness here? Or even what is my sweetness like? Because my sweetness might not be super lovey-dovey, I'm so sweet, I make you dinner, and da-da-da. My sweetness might be how I'm quiet and attentive and fully listen when you tell me something. Without judgment, would be my sweetness. Another word for Venus very much for me is kindness. How much kindness is in your life? How kind are you with yourself? How kind are you with others? If you have a Venus in Libra, what's your flavor of kindness? Could be listening. If you have a Venus in Scorpio, what's your level of kindness? Your kindness might be calling someone out on their shit in a kind way, but that's kindness. Kindness has many flavors. So I would love to hear from you if you are playing with planets in this way, having your own planet first experiences, or any variation of that. I love hearing experiences, and I look forward to the next time we are together. Blessings, everyone. Thank you so much.